Andrew Berry held a press conference this week, and I genuinely cannot stop thinking about it. Not because of what he said on the surface, the careful diplomatic answers, the measured tone, the professional composure that general managers spend entire careers perfecting. I cannot stop thinking about it because of what was underneath all of that. Because once you learn how to listen to these press conferences at the right level, once you stop taking the surface layer at face value and start paying attention to the architecture of how an executive like Berry actually constructs his answers, which words he reaches for, which framings he embraces, which questions he redirects, and which ones he leans into, the entire thing transforms. It stops being a general manager managing expectations. It becomes something much more significant. It becomes a front office that has already made its decision, communicating that decision in the only language available to it before the formal announcement arrives. I want to walk you through exactly what I heard because I think most people came away from that press conference with the wrong read. And that wrong read is not accidental. Organizations at this level depend on the wrong read. They need the public layer of diplomatic language to absorb the attention of the people who are not listening closely, because the surface layer is designed specifically to generate clean headlines without creating problems. What Berry was doing underneath that surface is something different entirely, and understanding the gap between those two things is the only way to understand what Cleveland just told the world about Shedeur Sanders. Let me start with the moment that genuinely stopped me mid-watch and made me go back and replay the clip twice. A reporter asked Berry directly about Shedeur heading into this season. What followed was not the warm organizational encouragement you extend toward a player you are still genuinely evaluating. It was not the careful positivity that front offices deploy to keep players engaged and motivated through an open competition. Berry got specific. He talked about Shedeur's decision-making improving in ways that were observable and documentable. He mentioned pocket management developing along the trajectory the coaching staff had been looking for. He referenced ball security becoming more consistent, situational awareness sharpening across evaluation periods throughout last year. And then he used a word that I have been sitting with all week because I do not believe it got the attention it deserved from anyone who covered that press conference. He said he expects Shedeur to have more command of the offense this season. Command, not comfort, not familiarity, not growing confidence, command. I need you to feel the difference between those words, because inside the professional football vocabulary, that difference is enormous. Comfort means a player is adjusting to his environment. Familiarity means he has stopped being surprised by what he encounters. Command means the offense has moved inside him. It means the system lives in his processing rather than in the playbook on his tablet. It means pre-snap, post-snap, under pressure, in 2-minute situations, behind by 7 with 4 minutes left. The quarterback operates from a place of settled authority, not effortful management. Front office executives do not reach for that word about players they are genuinely holding in open competition against alternatives. They use it about their quarterback, the one the offense is being constructed around, the one who is going to be expressing that command in real games that determine whether coaches keep their jobs and whether the front office keeps theirs. Berry used it about Shadur Sanders, in public, on the record, at a podium surrounded by reporters. You do not do that casually at his level of professional communication. Every word in that setting is a choice. Now I want to take you to what happened when the conversation shifted to Watson, and I want to do it slowly because the contrast is where the entire picture becomes undeniable. A reporter essentially handed Berry the easiest possible framing for acknowledging Watson as a genuine competitive threat. The question was generous, almost to the point of being a courtesy. The obvious and professionally safe answer was right there on the table. Of course, a quarterback who has made Pro Bowls and started NFL games for years brings something to a competition that a player with 7 professional starts cannot simply replicate through talent alone. That answer required nothing. It was available, harmless, and would have been forgotten by the next news cycle. Berry declined to pick it up. He would not grant Watson's professional experience any specific standing in this evaluation. He acknowledged experience as a general attribute that helps players who possess it, in the abstract, the same way height or arm strength helps players who possess those things. But he refused to connect it to Watson specifically as a meaningful competitive advantage over the player beside him in this competition. I want you to really absorb what just happened there. Deshaun Watson, the quarterback this organization paid $230 million fully guaranteed, the quarterback they surrendered 3 first-round picks to acquire, one of the most expensive transactions in the history of professional football, just had his own general manager decline to identify his extensive experience as a meaningful edge over a player in his second NFL year. That is not neutral diplomatic ground. That is not a general manager skillfully managing a sensitive competitive situation. That is a door being professionally, calmly, and completely closed. The composure never leaves Barry's face. The language stays measured and controlled throughout. The door is still closed. The structural gap between how Barry talked about Shedeur and how he talked about Watson is not something you have to squint to find. It is large. It is visible. It is there for anyone who gives the full press conference their genuine attention. One quarterback receives specific, enthusiastic, forward-looking language about command and growth and the observable development of real organizational trust in his future. The other received polite acknowledgement that his professional history exists and is documented. Those are not two versions of the same speech. Those are categorically different communications delivered in the same room on the same afternoon, and treating them as equivalent simply because both arrived in a measured professional register is how you miss the actual content of what was said. Barry did not hold a press conference about two quarterbacks in a genuinely open competition. He held a press conference in which one quarterback was discussed as a franchise piece and another was discussed with the careful professional courtesy you extend toward a situation that has already been internally resolved. I want to be direct about the financial reality here because I think it has been distorting this conversation for far too long, and Barry's press conference is the clearest signal yet that the distortion is ending inside the organization, even if it persists in the public commentary. $44.9 million. That is Watson's cap number against Cleveland's books this season. The franchise cannot release him without absorbing dead money consequences that would damage the exact infrastructure being built around the future that press conference was quietly announcing. He is on the roster. He is drawing the paycheck. He is doing both of those things while his own general manager publicly refuses to credit his experience with any standing over a second-year quarterback. The sunk cost psychology around the Watson contract has been one of the most powerful distorting forces in the Cleveland football conversation for 2 years. $230 million fully guaranteed. 3 first-round picks gone. The psychological weight of acknowledging openly that the most expensive contractual commitment in franchise history did not produce what anyone hoped is real, and it has a documented history of keeping organizations frozen in place, defensive about the past, unable to commit to a future that requires admitting the past did not work. The organizations that let that psychology drive their starting lineup decisions keep losing because they are making roster choices in service of avoiding the appearance of a mistake rather than in service of winning football games. Barry's press conference communicated, as clearly as organizational language at that level ever communicates anything, that Cleveland is not going to be that organization. The money is spent. The picks are gone. Those facts do not change based on who takes the first snap in Week 1. The only question that survives honest analysis from this point is which quarterback gives this team the best chance to win, and Barry told you where that answer sits without saying it in those exact words. The Watson frustration about where he stands is something I genuinely understand as a human response. This is an extraordinarily difficult professional situation for any competitor to navigate, being repositioned from a starter to a backup candidate after carrying the financial weight of a franchise on a contract of that magnitude. That frustration makes complete human sense. As a football consideration governing how the competition gets evaluated by the coaching staff and front office, it is not a factor. Barry's press conference made that irrelevance official and on the record, and the tone of how he communicated it was important too. There was no edge in how Barry handled Watson's portion of that press conference. No visible discomfort, no hesitation. The professionalism was consistent throughout, but professionalism delivered evenly across two very different communications still produces two very different communications, and the difference is what matters. Let me take you to the Talon Green portion of the press conference, because the contrast it creates with the Shedeur discussion adds a final structural layer to the picture that I think completes everything else Barry communicated. When Green came up, Barry's description of his developmental plan was essentially contained in 3 words: crawl, walk, run. Patient language, the language of organizational investment in a longer horizon, the language you use about a player whose contribution to this competitive season is not the point yet, because the point is building towards something down the road. There is nothing critical about that plan. It is genuinely the correct approach for a 6th-round pick, developing toward a future role. But the distance between crawl, walk, run language and command of the offense language is not a matter of degree or tone. It is a categorical separation. Anyone trying to build a genuine 3-way competitive narrative out of that press conference is not analyzing what Barry actually said. They are working against the content of what he said. Barry gave Green the patient developmental framing appropriate to his situation. He gave Watson the polite professional courtesy appropriate to his. He gave Shedeur the language that franchises reserve for the quarterback the offense is being organized around. 3 different conversations, 3 different organizational categories, all delivered in the same measured register across the same press conference. The question caution about rep distribution added one more layer worth noting. Barry confirmed that repetitions would not be split equally. Performance drives allocation. The competition is real, and the goal is to carry at least 3 quarterbacks on the final roster, provided they earn their spots. That phrase, provided they earn it, is doing real work in a small space. It preserves the formal language of an honest competitive process, and I want to be clear that the process itself is real. Organizations maintain competitive structures throughout the offseason because that is how you treat the players in your building with dignity, and because real competition produces real information. The process is not theater, but the totality of everything Barry communicated before that answer had already established a hierarchy clear enough that the competition framing reads as protocol, applied on top of an internal conclusion that had already been reached. Both things are true simultaneously. The competition is real, the direction is established. Barry held both of those realities in the same press conference without contradiction, because experienced executives know how to do that, and Barry is among the most experienced at doing it. I keep returning to that word, command. I keep returning to it because I think it is the single most important piece of evidence in the entire press conference, and I do not believe it received the analytical attention it deserved from the people covering the event. When an NFL general manager uses that specific word, in that specific context, not comfort, not growth, not development, but command, he is not varying his vocabulary for stylistic reasons. He is not reaching for a synonym because he used a different word earlier in the same answer. Command carries a precise and understood meaning inside this professional environment. It means the quarterback operates the offense with the authority of ownership, not the effort of execution. It means nothing in the system surprises him anymore because nothing exists outside of his understanding of it. It means the huddle follows him because he knows exactly where he is going before the ball is snapped. Front office executives reach for that word when they are talking about the player who represents their organizational future at the most important position in the sport. Barry reached for it about Shedeur Sanders in a room full of reporters, knowing exactly what he was saying to the people listening at the right frequency. The broader organizational context is what transforms this press conference from an interesting signal into a coherent declaration. Nothing Barry said exists in isolation. It is one piece of a picture that has been assembled methodically since the moment last season ended. Spencer Fano selected 9th overall, a first-round offensive tackle whose primary professional purpose is protecting a franchise quarterback on every single snap of every game that matters. Denzel Boston and Casey Conception brought in to complement the specific timing-based delivery and processing style of a particular kind of passer, a defense that finished last season in the top 5, returning structurally intact. Todd Monken as the head coach, a man who had zero involvement in the Watson acquisition and therefore carries zero psychological investment in justifying that decision through the depth chart he writes every week. And now Andrew Barry at a podium using the word command while professionally declining to extend Watson's experience, any acknowledged standing in the competition. Every piece of this picture was assembled with the same directional intent. Every decision points toward the same conclusion. The press conference is just the most recent and most public-facing piece of a pattern that has been consistent across the entire offseason. The formal announcement, the official depth chart confirmation, the press conference where someone stands up and says it in direct language without architectural implication, is going to arrive. When it does, I want to be precise about what it will actually represent. It will not be a decision being made in that moment. It will be a decision that was already made being acknowledged for the public record. The decision happened in film rooms. It happened on the practice field across evaluation periods that the coaching staff was watching more carefully than any press conference reveals. It happened in the internal organizational conversations that accumulate across an entire offseason until the direction becomes clear enough to commit to. And it happened, in a quieter but entirely legible way, at a press conference where a general manager chose one specific word about one specific quarterback and declined to extend a professional courtesy to another, command. Barry chose it deliberately, in public, on the record. The people in that room who understood the frequency at which that word operates heard exactly what he was saying. Cleveland's starting quarterback for the 2026 season was identified in that room. The announcement is just the translation into language that does not require frequency calibration to receive.